the council appointed officer committee meeting to order. If the clerk can call the roll.
Of course. Chair Stone.
Here.
Councilmember Burt. Vice Mayor Vinker. Here. For the record, all present.
Thank you. Do you have any public comments for anything that's not on the agenda?
No, there are no requests to speak and no hands are raised on Zoom.
Thank you. Then we'll move to our one and only action item, executive recruitment process review for council appointed officer, specifically the city attorney, including recommendation of executive recruitment firm and feedback on overall process. So I'll turn it over to staff.
Good afternoon, Chair Stone and council members. Sandra Blanche, HR Director. The purpose of today's CAO committee meeting is to discuss the upcoming vacancy of the city attorney's position due to Molly Stump's announcement that she's retiring at the end of this calendar year. To briefly summarize the staff report, the CAO committee is asked to review the three proposals of the three executive recruiters available to provide services and to also select one of the firms. Your recommendation will then go to the full council for their approval. In the staff report, we provided the timeline. It is expected to take approximately 6 months to complete this recruitment. All three firms have recent experience in placing qualified candidates for this council appointed officer position. The city has worked with all three firms in the past. Some of you will recall that Peckham and McKinney assisted with the city clerk recruitment. Terry Black and Company has assisted with several of our director positions, most recently the chief financial officer recruitment, and is currently working on the fire chief recruitment. Bob Murray and Associates submitted their proposal, and they were actually the executive recruiter who placed Molly Stump when she was hired. The proposal costs range between $30,000 to $39,000, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have. And virtually, Assistant HR Director Nick Raish is in attendance. He will be my backup and co-lead for this recruitment.
Great, thank you. Let's turn now to public comment if there's no other staff presentation.
Chair, there are no requests to speak and no hands are raised in Zoom.
Okay then, we'll come back to the dais. Would like to start us off? Yeah, Councilmember.
So first, are representatives of the recruiters with us today?
No one is present today.
Oh, we didn't ask them to be available?
We did not.
Oh, it kind of limits our ability to ask them questions as a follow-up.
Yeah, that wasn't something that we coordinated, fortunately.
Okay. So I don't know who to direct my questions to then. For instance, when I wanted to get a greater sense of their approach, I saw that, for instance, Bob Murray Company had really, just find that, had made note that they, where is it? Say strongest candidates are often those who are successful and content in their current positions and need to be sold on a new opportunity. And that's an approach that I'm not sure that all the recruitment firms really embrace strongly. I've seen over the years different times where recruiters for certain positions, that these are the applicants. We put a wide noticing that this position was available and all the right approaches, but that's different from really an approach that kind of targets applicants who may be most appropriate in their mind or our mind, and to increase the kind of the quality of the candidate pool versus the quantity. So that was one thing that was of interest to me. I didn't pick up that the other firms had noted that, but they may have. Another thing that I saw was that that under the Terry Black, is it? Is that what it is? TV?
Yes.
Yeah. They said that the recruiters will work closely with the council and the city manager to design a customized candidate profile. And do you have any other insights on why they said it would be with a city manager?
Not for this recruitment. It would be with the CEO committee.
With support from the HR department, like we often do, yes.
Yes, and also they will, interview the other CEO officers more from a
Yeah,
standpoint of colleagues, right? The CEOs
yeah,
work
but that's not what
closely.
I'm referring to. At the top of packet page 46, it says to design a customized candidate profile, recruitment strategy, and timeline. And so that may have been a pro forma paragraph there. It would have been one of the questions I would ask them for clarification on is, did you really mean that? Because being a council appointed officer, historically the role of this, there's not a role of the city manager in developing the profile, the recruitment strategy, and the timeline. There is in part of the internal candidate scrutiny that we typically will include as part of the process of reviewing candidates as we narrow them down. So that would have been a question I would have asked.
And you're absolutely correct. They would work with HR and also with each of you to craft this recruitment brochure to the profile that you specify.
Yeah, it concerned me that the proposal didn't seem to be customized to this position and the fact that this is a CAO. It looks like kind of a standard verbiage that they have there that may not be reflective of their approach, but it was something that I raised a flag on. Let me turn it over to you guys for a while. I may have other questions or comments.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for bringing these firms forward and the background information. Even the oral introduction today added some helpful background. I want to start by thinking out loud with the committee about some of the process things, and then I have some specific comments about the different recruiters. One of the things I'm wondering is these applicants or recruiters often had references and often have done work with cities right nearby in this peninsula. And it might, I don't know if you've talked to their references, but it might be helpful if there were some way we could also get some information from them. Is there any process that you can sort of sort out where we could do that?
Yes, we can follow up with recruiters that you would like us to regarding any recent recruitment with a neighboring city. Is that
Yeah, so let
your
me
thought?
say it a little differently. And I know we've worked with all of them, so our best reference is ourselves. But some of these that are where the recruitments, since we've had the city attorney for what, 13 years, I believe, we haven't done one in 15. Thank you. We haven't done one in the legal field. And a lot of the relevant experience, I believe, is those who have done work with city attorneys, deputy city attorneys, special district attorneys, all of that. And that's what they cited in their applications. So some of those neighboring cities that may be somewhat similarly situated in size or in, residence and that type of thing, it might be helpful to also check with them about how that working relationship was. Were they satisfied with how hard the applicant pool was developed, how hard the work was to do it, those kinds of things. So I'm just wondering if there's a way, if you have not, like I noticed Mountain View Mayor Ellen Kamei was on somebody's list and various other folks. Sunnyvale just hired a city attorney. That seems like highly relevant experience. I believe the McKenna folks did that one, Peckham, whichever way that name is. So that I'm wondering if there's any way to get access to reference information.
Yes, we can certainly ask the recruiter or HR staff at either of those agencies that you would like more information from.
Well, maybe what we should do is go through this meeting, see what it is we want to know, and then we can decide, because we don't want to have a ton of time. We don't want to talk to, 25 references, but there may be some things that are more relevant. So I just wanted to make sure that was an option.
Right, and I was just about to point out that any other steps we take will delay the start of the process. So
Yes,
we
which
just
I'm
need to be aware of that.
very concerned about. So on that note, I also noticed what seemed to be a difference of emphasis or process stuff between and amongst the recruiters. And specifically, some of them spend a lot more upfront time interviewing internal stakeholders and such, and developing brochures and things. And it takes a while to get the word out and even start developing the applicant pool. Then the back end's pretty fast where we interview. It gives me a little pause. Others are pretty quick to get something out and then take more time with the interview phase. For example, even developing a supplemental questionnaire for the top candidates, which I quite like, because I think this is one that might take some digestion and exploration in the interview stage. So that's an interesting thing. And I guess what I would be interested in, thoughts from my colleagues, is yes, we're a special city. Yes, this is, it's a unique position because you have utilities, you have all kinds of stuff here. You have a giant university next door. But I don't know that we need to spend an extraordinary amount of time developing a brochure. I would think what a city attorney does is kind of standard to start with, and then we could make it our own. And I would encourage us to look at Molly's self-assessment that is very current, that she just wrote, which is terrifically detailed with respect to her job, what she's done, the milestones, who she supervises, what they do. It is so detailed. It's almost like she gave us this roadmap. So I would hope we could find a process that takes advantage of that and builds out the front end relatively quickly. And we spend a lot of time trying to develop a qualified applicant pool and interacting with them to make the decision that may not be an easy one. So that's a general point. Another point, I didn't notice it in the processes, but I could have overlooked it. One of the things that I know was done recently with our utilities director hire, and that both our city manager and our city attorney have participated in, is panels of people holding that same position from other cities interviewing applicant pools. So in other words, Molly, I believe, sat on the panel for the Sunnyvale city attorney hire. I know Ed Shikata has gone to other cities to help with utilities director hires.
Mm-hmm.
So are we, can we, should we, will we have a similar panel of other city attorneys as part of this process? Because I didn't note that in the processes they outlined.
Yes, when we develop the panelists that will serve on the interview panel, we will include other colleagues with the same expertise.
Okay, so I assume internally there may be some directors that are not in the attorney's office, but we'll also have external city attorneys, because I guess having hired and unfortunately fired a few, hired a lot of attorneys over the years. depending on what type of law they practice, it's hard for people outside of that area to assess their technical skills, which are going to be super important here. So I would love it if we had some other city attorneys not make the decision for us, but give us some feedback as to their assessment of the technical skill of the applicants.
Yes, definitely. That is part of our, as much as possible, we always try to have an external panelist.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so back to these folks specifically. When I looked at the Bob Murray firm, I didn't see anything on the peninsula except for the Mid-Penn Regional Open Space District, which is a special district, which is a little different because of the narrow subject matter. And at a city, you have to kind of be a jack of all legal trades. It also is an AGC position, which I think is a little different than the top person who does a lot of administering of the practice team. I don't think Molly does a lot of research and writing herself. I think she administers more. I also noticed that the Air District General Counsel was mentioned on that reference list, and I can just report that that was an internal promotion, which doesn't mean they didn't do a good job. It just means it doesn't help us know whether they can attract good external candidates. And this had a 16-week total, so it's a little longer than some of the other. Well, actually, it was kind of in the middle, right? Terry Black had 15 to 17. Roberta Greathouse had a little shorter. This is certainly something I don't want to rush, but I'm eager. And so on that point, my question is, what if we get to the end of the first set of applicants and we've interviewed them and we're just not excited and we need to go back out into the market? Would there be additional fees, or how does that work? Is there a fee for the search until we get someone, or is it going to cost? I hope that doesn't happen.
Right. Great question. I'm not sure that has happened in quite some time. However, my recollection is that there would be an additional fee, but modified for sure.
Yeah, we might want to find out, because I'm sorry, did it say?
I believe that and that's, I think, what Nick's going to point out. One of the applicants at least said it's an additional 7,500 for a second round or something to that effect.
Yeah, I noticed one that said if the person doesn't stay after a year, but I'll go look for that. Thank you. And finally, I have some other things, but I'll wrap for now. I just want to say that part of the reason I'm asking that is there's a lot of open city attorney spots. There's going to be tough competition because Sunnyvale just hired one, so took somebody off the market. I believe that in addition to, in the staff report, it mentioned Morgan Hill, Livermore, Milpitas, Los Banos. I believe Sacramento either is or was also open, Santa Monica, Santa Barbara. Those are nice places. There's, universities around there too. So I think we need to be really thoughtful and somewhat aggressive about our process. And I think there also was a recent recruitment in San Jose as well. So
That's right.
Those are my thoughts for the moment. Sorry, it's a lot, but this is something that, I'm really eager to see us do to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Few questions. Overall, I agree with everything that's being said, and I completely agree as well about performing outreach and finding out other experiences locally, especially. So Bob Murray recently worked with Santa Clara to find their city attorney. We need to be talking about them, talking with them to see how that process went. Peckham McKinney recently worked with Sunnyvale to find their city attorney. Do you know there was an asterisk next to that, and it called out that their recruitment was conducted by by someone else. It seemed like they said by Miss Greathouse. Is that, do you know who that is associated with that firm? I just found that odd to be specifically called out.
That is the same recruiter that they're offering for this recruitment.
Okay, so they're just pointing out that that person worked. Okay,
Yes.
I appreciate that.
That she was assigned to that recruitment.
Okay. Oh yeah, I missed that. For the candidate selection process, as far as the council panel interviews, is that trying to understand kind of the process of how we determine who's a part of that? I mean, is that typically the full council? Is that the CAO? Is that the CAO committee, I mean? Or is that based on recommendation from us to the full council? Do you know how that?
It is typically the full council.
Okay.
In closed session.
And then have you talked with Molly Stump to understand kind of her engagement in the process? Because I understand she intends to stay with us at least through the end of the year. And is there potential to be able to stay on a little longer if this recruitment process goes on a little longer than we would want? And how engaged can she be in helping kind of review the questions, be a part of of these interviews and feedback? I mean, she's been in this role for so long. I think her feedback would be so invaluable.
Agreed. I'll take that direction and, gladly ask her to assist. So you can direct that, and I'll definitely review any questions or have her involved.
Okay. Yeah, I think having her kind of thoughts and engagement on this would be really valuable, because nobody knows this role better than she, and
That's right.
would love to kind of have her help with this. And then kind of when looking at the firms, I mean, there are some that seem to have far more local experience. Like I think the Terry Black and Company seems to have the most local experience. And not that is what matters the most, but I also think what we've had experiences in this city recently over the last several years of hiring good people, but because of whether it might be cost of living or traffic or just kind of Bay Area culture, whatever it may be, it's just not a fit. And so having a firm that really understands the uniqueness of the Bay Area, the uniqueness of Palo Alto, I think those are all kind of perspectives that I want to make sure that they have when they're communicating with these applicants. Because what none of us want is to go through a lengthy, expensive process. The person comes and they're not a good fit and they're gone in a year or two. And so I do think firms with that local experience would be beneficial. Those are my thoughts for now, because again, I don't want to repeat things that have already been said by both colleagues. I agree with them both. I mean, I don't know if I think it's gonna be challenging to choose a firm tonight, because I agree with Councilmember Burt. Would have been helpful to be able to have representatives here to ask some of these follow-up questions, and the applications all look great. And so this is challenging to do. And I mean, is there, yeah. And I think hearing the feedback from surrounding communities that have worked with these firms would be really beneficial. Should we, interested? Oh yeah, please.
Oh, sorry, this is City Clerk Mia. We do have a request to speak from the public if you're interested in reopening public comment for this item.
Yeah, why don't we take a break of us talking and we'll open it up. And then we'll come back to the dais for another round.
Perfect. Our first request to speak is Herb B.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I have a couple of comments on process. First, you agree with your council-appointed officers on goals and objectives and key performance indicators. But once they're agreed on, I believe they're identifiable public records, and one of the places to disclose them is in the recruitment brochure for the position. And then the others are when you have your council meetings to evaluate, and people can speak, but if they don't know what those are, they will talk about anything, because you always have an excuse of a few minutes. The other thing to consider is criteria that might have been used for someone hiring an attorney for a completely different job than city attorney. And the one that I learned about was when Huey Newton of the Black Panthers was on trial for murder, he rejected all these attorneys he interviewed until he interviewed Charles Garrett and he hired him. And Newton had 3 trials. A conviction on a lower offense was thrown out to judicial error, and there were 2 hung juries. And then the district attorney disclosed they had never found the murder weapon, and he moved to dismiss the case, although many people thought Newton actually did it. And when he interviewed Newton interviewed Gary, he asked him what kind of attorney he was, and he said he was the best attorney there was. And Newton wanted to know if he was as good as Perry Mason. And Charles Gary said he was better than Perry Mason. And Newton said, but Perry Mason won all those cases. And Charles Gary said he won all those cases too. So Newton was wondering, how was this possible that one was better than the other? And he said, well, they both won all the cases, but all of Perry Mason's clients were innocent. The application they may consider here is whether any public officials in the performance of the duties now or in the future may need an attorney who's better than Perry Mason, and whether you would want that kind of an attorney. And if in fact you believe that you have one now, either through her own skills or her staff's or the consultant she hired, you should disclose that in the recruitment brochure and give examples of what you mean when you say you want an attorney who's a better attorney than Perry Mason. Thank you.
We have no other requests to speak.
All right, thank you. And we'll come back, Councilmember Burt.
All right, good story. I'm going to borrow it. First, at our, presuming we're going to do a follow-up meeting, one of the things that I think would be a valuable reference is our 2010 brochure. Not that we would necessarily use the same, but it's a valuable reference check. Work was done into it to try to characterize those particular things about our city's needs. And I would imagine that it would be a good starting point and maybe a more valuable starting point than brochures that these very capable firms have done for other cities. I'd want to see both things. I agree with a number of things that Vicki said on the value of Molly's self-assessment as a reference point, and then the value of what I'll call the peer panel of neighboring cities. And Sandra, I know you said that we'd be doing it, but it's not listed in the table or anywhere in the staff report that I can find. If it's there, please point it out to me. But I think either way, we'd want to do that. We also talk, there's a reference, says panel interviews with council and stakeholders under the candidate selection. And we need to talk about who those stakeholders are. And depending on the positions, we've had stakeholder groups of community leaders where we had a number of times each council member would select one community leader stakeholder to participate in that group. And then other times we've also had staff interviews where it would be either the senior reports or like in the case of a city manager, it'd be all the department heads. And I will say that my recollection is that that latter group often came up with different recommendations on candidates from both the and even inverse rankings from the council and the community leaders, and a caution on using people who would report to a hire as a interview process, because in many cases, what you'll get a response is this is the manager that I'd like to have, which may be the manager who is going to give me the most latitude and be least demanding of me. Not necessarily, but I've really seen a pattern that over the years, and it's been striking how different, actually inverse order of who the council has often been aligned with that community stakeholder in the rankings, and then the staff rankings were just the opposite, and we didn't go with the staff rankings. And so then there's also this tendency to refer to in the brochures the ideal candidate. And I really think, I don't know what's a better way to title it, but I never feel comfortable. There is no such thing. And maybe it's really a better descriptor is along the lines of what are the characteristics or qualifications we're most seeking as opposed to ideal candidate. But that may be just more of a difference in how that section is titled in the substance, and so maybe it's not a big issue. I also noticed that in the table of the proposed process under candidate selection, the second bullet was final round interview with mayor and other CAOs. Why would it be the mayor and other CAOs rather than it's a council? The mayor doesn't have any exceptional role in the selection of a CAO. Why is that even proposed that way?
That may have been a process of in a different agency that's being.
Well, this is our staff report. This is not their proposal. This is under the staff report. It's an executive recruitment process and timeline. The table, it's not a numbered table, but it's the second to last section, candidate selection. Okay, well, then I'll just leave it that under our process, the mayor doesn't have an extra role in that selection.
That may have been referring to, I think the mayor may have been the CAO chair during the clerk process.
Okay, well, we still want to have this. That's another reason to have another meeting. We want to have this really reflect accurately the plan. Another question is on, Vicky had a good point of reference checks on the recruitment agencies. And then there's always the issue of reference checks on the candidates. And there's often a preference that we could do reference checks on the final 2 or 3 candidates, but a hesitancy for there to be the most substantive references if a candidate doesn't want to notify their current employer that they're considering the position. And that's just this natural tension. And so those reference checks that can even be in person on site. When we hired city manager in 2008, we divvied up reference checks on, I think, the last couple of candidates, and went to their cities and met in person with kind of some leading people, or even if I'm recalling, we went to not at that time the current employer, but the previous employer, like Peter Druckmeyer and I went to Berkeley and things like that. We found that pretty valuable. And actually, the previous employer, everybody was kind of then open on really giving candid assessments because there was no longer any ongoing relationship there and other than just their objective appraisal. So I don't know what will be possible, and some of that has to kind of be negotiated with that final few candidates. But it's certainly something that I'd want to explore and is valuable if we can get that consent. And then, you know, the how broadly we look at the pool. As Greer pointed out, we get times where we have candidates and then they say, oh yeah, I know housing's expensive in your area, but I'm good with moving there from out of state or out of the region. And then they come and look and they go, holy smokes, I didn't realize I only get that for my 3 million or whatever. And yet, broadening the recruitment outside of our region when we have at the same time this competition for a limited number of really capable candidates may be something that we do want to look at. And so we have that tension between the risk that they think they want the job and then realize maybe it's not right versus not being able to look at some really qualified people who might say, my dream job's been Palo Alto. I mean, literally, we may see people who think that way. So I'd want to explore that with the recruiters. Just echoing too on the recruiters where they list the different agencies that they've done recruiting for. I'd want to know when that occurred, particularly among city attorneys, and then those who have worked with us, when and what functions they did for us, and have that substantive data. That's everything in mind other than us figuring out when we meet again.
All right.
Could I add an option that a CEO committee established for, I believe it was the city auditor, was to designate the interview with one of the CEO chair as one option of the interview process rather than having the entire committee.
The interview of the recruiter, or?
Yes.
I see. Well, I think we're going to have a number of follow-ups that we need a meeting on to make sure we've got our process agreed on. So in my mind, that would give us the opportunity to meet with all of them, but we'll see.
All right, thank you. Just following up on that, one of the things I was thinking of coming into this meeting that might work is if we were to find an hour where we could, even whether they come in person or Zoom or whatever, if it's easier to do that than getting here after, and setting up the thing, had 3 20-minute back-to-back interviews, even that with them, I think we could accomplish a lot because we do have materials from them. We're discussing it now, and it might just give us that sense of interpersonal, because this is a very high-touch process, right? We want someone who's going to have the judgment and the persona to represent us well and interact with. So, and we've worked with Terry, and I know these firms have been around, but I think in this context, it's a little different also because the city attorney is a very unique position. She does not report to the city manager. She counsels the city, she counsels us. She needs to be independent. She needs to give us bad news as well as good. She needs to, ply her craft, in a way that is excellent and objective and clear. And that's a little different than almost any other position in the city. So that's why, this precedent is helpful, but we haven't done this for 13 years or for 15. I keep getting it wrong. And so I think we need to be really cognizant of that. And so on that, as I look at the process in the staff report, I would love to see the first 2 categories, if we could, tightened up a little bit. And what I mean there is on the recruitment stages chart, the planning and candidate profile development, if that takes 6 weeks, I'm going to be disappointed. Because again, this role, I mean, yes, we should look at other brochures and we should look at our old one. And I'm glad that, Pat also thinks that Molly's own self-review is a good source. But I think I think we can put that together pretty quickly. When you're at the top of the heap like she is, it's about deploying the legal resources as best one can, and then being that filter as to what gets presented to us, and when do we retain outside counsel, and what, when is that expertise outside of what we have in house? How do we do that within budget? What's prioritized? It's a skill set that anyone who would be a decent candidate is probably fairly aware of because they've managed legal practice groups. And so I just would hope we could condense that at least closer to the 4-week. Same with the advertising and sourcing. Because I think the candidate review and screening, that 3 to 4 weeks might be ambitious. And one way to perhaps condense this a little is we have, executive recruiter screens all applicants to determine best qualified. In that third bucket, that third category of candidate review and screening, I would hope some of that would go in parallel with the candidate pool creation, because I would hope they'd be looking at applicants as they come in, like the resumes, because if they're not good enough, they need to hit the pavement harder. If they are, they can feel pretty good and, call it quits at the time, with the deadline we give. And so that to me is something I want them to try to do, on a sort of a rolling basis. So following up on what the chair was talking about with respect to our current city attorney helping us out, just anecdotally, I did speak to her. She did seem very willing to give us whatever feedback and input that she's asked to give. I share the concern that we might need some of that after December 31st, or even if we don't, we'll want some transition process. And so I wonder, even if she, we honor that date that she's set and given us notice, would there be any ability to explore just even having her as a consultant for another 2 or 3 months, just sort of on an as needed, get the other person up to speed or counsel us basis? Could we explore something like that? I don't know if she's willing, but are we?
Yeah, certainly we can explore. We'll have to discuss that with her.
Sure.
I don't know specifically the date that her final date. So we certainly can explore that.
I think it might be worth just having some preliminary exploratory conversations, because this transition is going to be a significant one. And to the extent she can help us both give feedback on her successor and, orient them a bit. She's not going to want to you never want to hover around when there's a new boss in town. You don't want to do it that way, but just even to spend any time debriefing, if that seems appropriate, I think we should explore being able to do that. I noticed, this is just a little thing, I noticed in one of the applications, there was several $1,000s for printing brochures, and that seems kind of old fashioned in this digital age. Do we mail them? Like, what do we do with printed brochures as opposed to just posting on websites and emailing folks?
Usually they do print a smaller a quantity, if there's a conference such as Cal Cities, that either council is attending or the city manager, that they can be shared at conferences.
Yeah.
But it is a small number because, to your point, we're not sending them out anymore.
It also seems like a small community, like lawyers talk. And so I would bet word will get around pretty fast that this spot's opening up. Okay, so back to our options. I would love the chance to do it, at least a Zoom call with them, but I was a little concerned about the Bob Murray firm not having a lot of nearby geographically relevant experience. Although they look quite impressive and great. Roberta Greenhouse at I always get it wrong. Peckham, what's the first?
Yes, Peckham and McKinney.
Peckham and McKinney. I'm very interested in speaking with her because she, I believe, did that Sunnyvale city attorney recruitment, and would know, if nothing else, the candidate pool, like very, very current, very, very local candidate pool, and how she was successful in getting candidates also. So, what did and didn't really work so well for right here. So that'd be interesting. They have a similar size operating budget in the $300 million range. So, but I did notice on their brochure that they had 7 years experience. That makes me nervous. So that's one thing we will need to obviously spend time on getting, whether we call them qualifications or, close to ideal candidate, whatever we call them, the 7 years just feels short to me. And so I think there's that kind of stuff we're going to want to really work through with the recruiter. Terry Black, which known quantity, done a lot of local communities in the legal field, is very, very interesting to me. So I think that's one where I'm sort of leaning her way, but I think we need to do more with both the references and the interviews. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
We can speak to your question about the process of applications as they come in. Nick can speak to that.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor and committee members. A couple things while I have the moment to address a couple of the items that came up during your discussion. So the discussion of references. So as a part of bringing these 3 firms to you tonight, we did engage with many of our local agencies that they work with, including Sunnyvale, Redwood City, Mountain View, and others, to see what their recent experiences were like. And all of these 3 firms are here because they received an excellent review from our colleagues in HR roles there. So if any of those conversations hadn't gone well, we would not have brought that firm for you tonight. So to some extent, that piece of vetting the firm's references has already been done prior to bringing them to you tonight. As mentioned in some of the prior discussions, the guarantee section of each of the bids outlines what happens if a candidate is not successful, and if we don't get the type of candidates, the quality of candidates, or the depth of candidates we like and don't select any of them. The standard is that they will go out one more time for us, and they will do the full process with only charging us the expenses for things that have to be produced. So if we buy more advertising, if we did another print of the same brochure because we made some minor changes, those tangible expenses we would bear the cost of, but everything else is covered for one additional rerun within each of the bids. The third piece was around timeline. So as you notice, most of the timelines are right around that 4-month, yet in the staff report, you'll see that we say 6 months. That's because our timeline includes this. This is stage 1, which includes discussing which executive recruiter we're going to include. So when we talk about that 4 to 6 weeks of phase 1, that includes the process we're going through now to select the recruiter and them know the general process we would like them to bring to bear, knowing that each recruiter, as you all mentioned, has their little nuances they like to do different in their recruitment process. And then the process of reviewing candidates throughout the entire 4 or 5 week process, they are reviewing already tiering and ranking candidates, and in some situations already sending out supplemental questionnaires to the people they already see as the best or the top. The caveat is the last 48 hours of executive recruitments sees not only the most applications, but the best applications. And traditionally, that's because people who take the most time in preparing their cover letter, preparing their resume, getting all their documents in order, wait till that last 48 hours to submit. So any recruiter within this bunch you ask will say that's when our highest demand candidates usually enter the process. And then panel demographics, as Councilmember Burt pointed out, there's a sentence that says and stakeholders, and that's meant to mean who we all select as a committee that need to be a part of it. That could be subject matter experts who are active city attorneys in other areas that we didn't convince to be in our process, of course. That could be community engagement, that could be members of ELT, et cetera. So that all is flushed out with us and the executive recruiter as we work through it.
That is tremendously helpful. Thank you very much. And I love the comment about the last 48 hours. And knowing how deadline-driven lawyers are, you can probably call it to last 24. All right, thank you.
Yeah, all that context was really helpful. I mean, it seems like we're aligned on next steps, but the clerk's office, we just need to follow up with the three of us to find a date that's going to work for the committee and representatives from these firms. I like the idea of just 20 kind of setting up back to back kind of interviews with the firms, but also hearing that they have been vetted and we've already talked to references. That makes me a little more comfortable. I mean, I agree with the vice mayor as far as Terry Black as of now is most interesting to me. Bob Murray seems to just have a little too much kind of experience outside of the region, and but kind of looking again at the process, I agree. As far, I think the timeline can really be timed up because this already starts to put us into the next year somehow already by the time we're getting to candidate review and screening, candidate selection, if this all takes. Yeah, I don't know. So it seems like a long process that is not necessary. And then just on the candidate selection, on the interviews and the final round interviews, I think that needs to be flipped. I find it odd that the final round interview would be with other CAOs and the mayor or any appointed council member. If it feels like the city council should be the last interview, as the city council will be this person's boss. So that seems like that's a bit of out of order for me.
The reason it's in that order is because council will narrow the number of candidates, and the CAOs would interview with that narrowed number of, top 2 or top 3 candidates. That's why it's flipped like that.
Okay, so you're saying the council interviews a broader selection?
Correct.
Okay, and then upon the council kind of referral of top 3, then we also get CAO's opinions.
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think well, I guess this will all be then discussed with the recruitment firm too, as far as then who is in that meeting. And I see Nick nodding his head. So I'm not the expert. I'll defer to their more expertise and experience. Any other thoughts before we
Just a
move
few.
on? Okay, go ahead.
So one, on the experience, I just want to note that when we hired Molly, my recollection is that she was the least experienced of the top candidates. She only had 3 years in a more senior role in the San Francisco City Attorney Office. She had a total of 15, and that was her entire legal career, but only 3 years in a senior role. But really, I think she really impressed the council with her aptitude, and we thought that she would be able to acquire whatever experience she needed in the job. She also didn't have any background in planning and very little, if any, in utilities. So her background was not the basis. In fact, it was in some ways a detriment to her resume, but one that was outweighed by, we thought, other factors. And then just one note on Bob Murray as a company. He had been, Bob Murray Company, and Bob Murray himself, as I recall, was our recruiter for both the city manager in 2008 and the city attorney in 2010. And we were very pleased, but it's the same company title, but not the same people. So I don't have any familiarity with their current ownership team. And then on that issue of the last interview, I understand why the CAOs would be in a process after the council is narrowed. But I would also assume that we would have another council interview subsequent to that. And whether that would be with the final 2 or 3 candidates, or if we've narrowed it to one, a final interview to make sure we're really comfortable with the decision. But sequentially, I think that that should be one of the steps that we identify. Now, we can always tweak this as we go forward, but this is our tentative plan, and I think we'd want to do that. So those are my thoughts. And then the only other thing is, because as Sandra noted, you know, we're not going to make a decision today on the selection, and we want to not lose time. Can we even right now check our calendars and see if we have a date that we can agree on, and just move forward? That's fine. I can tell you what my dates are next week.
Yeah, let's finish up in the discussion and we'll see, and then maybe the clerk can kind of prepare for that. But then I'm sure coordinating then with the 3 firms also might be a bit challenging. So let's finish up here and then.
Can I
Heads
also
up.
just add one more thought to Councilmember Vinker's point about and I think you also mentioned, our HR team could start working on a draft of the brochure, so that we, you know, take advantage of the time right now to show to you by the time we schedule another meeting.
Yeah, that seems great. Okay, Vicky?
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be fabulous to just parallel process those things. So that's a great suggestion, Sandra. So I was going to suggest that we just do 2 if we could narrow it down to 2 Zooms, if we could narrow it down. But when Pat was speaking about Bob Murray, it also reminded me that one nice thing about having someone out of the area is you might get a broader statewide applicant pool. And for a job like this, people might move here from SoCal to be the city attorney of Palo Alto. I mean, I know we can be self-impressed around here, but I think for this one, it would be interesting. I do know when I was at Cal Cities just last year and I was running into various city attorneys down there, they all knew Molly. They know each other. So, you know, there is that aspect of, because I was going to suggest we do the other 2, but maybe we just do all 3, because why not? It's one more 20-minute. And I do agree with Councilmember Byrd that we should find some times for that. But first, I also want to echo his point about council making the final decision. That just feels like the way it should be. So, you know, and whether it's the top 2 or the top 1, I think depends on how the process unfolds. I think when we do the one just prior to that, we'll know. But I don't see the CAOs making the final decision, which is what this appears to indicate.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not mean to indicate that the CEOs made the final decision. In the sequence of the interview process, the CEOs are after the council has narrowed down the candidate list, but they are almost in parallel doing their interview, and then we'll give you feedback to the top 2 or 3 candidates, but they do not make the final decision.
So I kind of remember now, so if we have done those interviews and then the CAOs do those interviews and give us feedback, if that's enough, we can make a decision. And if it's not, we could then go interview the last 1 or 2. So maybe we make a game time call on that. Okay. And yeah, I just want to, on the experience, I completely agree. It's not number of years, it's quality of the lawyer. I'm just skeptical that in 7 years you can get enough experience to do this job. I think there's a big difference between 7 and 15. But yes, I agree. I was not a sports lawyer when I became the general counsel of women's professional soccer, and I think I did an all right job. So yes, yeah, it's even though I was new at that, it was not my expertise. I did find it had a lot of IP, so that was helpful. But yes, people move around, and in some ways it invigorates a lawyer to have a new subject area, and they do have a team. Again, she's not just doing this on her own. So I think we should be flexible on that. That one struck me as a bit too flexible. So should we, well, I'll turn it over to the chair to help us move. forward.
Yeah, so let's see if we're able to find a date, and if not, then we can do then the clerk can just follow up kind of the typical process of doing this offline. But what, I guess, from the clerk's perspective, are there any nights next week that do not work? Well, yeah, afternoons, evenings that don't work next week.
So looking at next week, the 15th, we do have a city council meeting, so potentially we could meet, the CO committee could meet before that meeting. I'm not sure if the firms are available. So the 15th, we have council. The 16th, we would not be able to make it work. There's a finance committee meeting at 5:30
And a rail committee.
and a rail
meeting.
committee meeting that precedes that at 2:30. The 17th, which is Wednesday, we do not have any public meetings scheduled, so that date could potentially work.
We have the SCAP working group in the afternoon and then the Cubberley master plan in the evening.
And then on the 18th, which is Thursday, we could potentially make that work.
I have a BOSCA meeting.
Okay. Friday, the 19th. Not sure if that would work for
We have a
staff,
climate
but there's
meeting,
climate action.
and I have something, two things right after that.
So that brings us to the week of the 22nd. Council does not have a council meeting on the 22nd, so we could potentially have a meeting there, as well as pretty much any date from the 22nd to the 26th that week. From the perspective of public meetings, we don't have.
Thank you. I see Nick's hand is up, so go ahead, Nick, while we look at our calendars.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I'll take this opportunity while calendaring to mention that while we can invite all of the executive recruiters to an open and public meeting of this nature, it might be a very different conversation than if one individual was selected to go and interview these people. The things that, an executive recruiter might be willing to share from the dais versus in one of those meetings could be different. And I only mention that while we're now seeing this date move out further and further in our timeline.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, is there, because then I can't do the 15th before the council meeting. So yeah, that puts us out then the following week. I'm comfortable with that, with sort of that suggestion about, do we select one of our own to, sorry?
You're saying we each take on one of the recruiters?
That we could do that, or appoint kind of just one of us to be the one to the point of contact. I don't really care so much.
I
So thought, yeah.
think if the information we were seeking was more objective, we could split it up, but because it's more subjective, I'd almost rather one of us do it, and I'd defer to either of you if you want it, or if you want me to do it.
How about the week of the 22nd then?
The 22nd would work for me. I mean, I had expected it was a council meeting. I was pleasantly surprised yesterday to see that it's not. Not fun to fill up that one Monday with a meeting, but I don't think this should take all that long.
That's fine. I do agree about the lack of candor thing. Well, not lack of candor, that puts it negatively, that we would not have the greater candor. But I could do it then. It would be nice if we could do it at 4 as opposed to,
On the 22nd, you mean?
yeah.
That works for me.
That time is challenging
Oh,
for me.
when do you free up?
Probably 5:30.
Oh, I see. Okay. That's fine.
So 5:30 on the 22nd?
Yeah, if they can do that.
Okay, let's give that a try.
And we want to make sure that the recruiters can do it. Should we have a backup date too that we pencil in?
And if the three of us are together, do we need to be physically together? Here I am talking about Zoom. I'm not sure that we can do that. I don't know, for committees, for Brown Act, I mean, if we have to be here.
Oh, yeah, no, well, we'd have to have how many of us here?
At least the majority of you here
Okay, so two of us would have to be here, then the other one would have to be
could be.
posted and,
All that stuff.
yeah.
So as a backup, how's the 23rd or 24th?
I cannot do the 24th or the rest of that week. I'll be in NCPA stuff.
23rd?
And 23rd.
I could do the
is-
23rd.
I could do
if it's-
23rd at like 6.
Okay,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so 22nd, 5:30, primary, backup is the 23rd at 6.
Yeah. Now I'm saying all this and I have some of those dates are in flux for an all-day engagement, professional engagement that could go into the evening. So if I'll have to sort that out. But I do think that if we're going to come reconvene around this, it might be great if we had a draft brochure to look at that point.
Just to note, the 22nd is a high holiday.
oh,
So it is Rosh Hashanah. However, HRC did review our council and council committee meeting dates, and it was a suggested date for council meetings. So we did specifically leave that purposefully that committees could meet whenever. So it is up to the committee, I think, if they'd like to meet on that date or not.
That starts at sundown, is that right?
Correct.
well, and
5:30.
given that, so if we as committee members don't have a conflict, and if depending on whether the proposed recruiters have a conflict, I'd be okay with a meeting if none of those participants have a conflict.
I agree. Okay. Great.
Are
And Sandra,
we-
that turnaround time is realistic for the flyer?
Yes.
Perfect.
And I just
And-
realized I lost track. Are we talking the 22nd or the 23rd?
22nd is the
Thank
primary.
you.
And we'll also get to see the 2010 brochure.
Yes,
Great.
if we don't have it, we'll ask
Okay.
Aubrey.
Thank you.
And just to, we'll have the content of the brochure, we won't have it all ready to go with
It
pictures.
won't be
with
glossy.
photos. No, it won't be gloss.
Understood.
Okay, anything else? No, hearing none, then anything else from staff or any questions? Nope,
No, thank you.
great. All right, thanks, everyone. Then we are adjourned. See you on hopefully the 22nd.